Thanks for coming out tonight. Can I get a show of hands who's fished in the area I'm going to talk about in the Yellowstone Park? Oh, great. All right. So if you guys see me say something wrong, like scream, right? So the goal tonight, I'm going to cover two topics. We're going to talk about wade fishing the northeast corner. And then we're going to talk, we'll do a little bit here on the back end on backpacking some alpine lakes outside of the park. The goal really in this presentation is if you have always wanted to go out to that area and you're just not sure where to go or what to do, if you're a successful angler here in the driftless area, you can do really well out there. And I'll talk about a few streams where you can, almost certainly get some good success. So yeah, let's dive in. We're going to talk about, I'm going to pick a base city here. And the reason I picked this base city is it gives access to these two areas, wade fishing the northeast corner of Yellowstone Park and backpacking a really huge number of alpine lakes. And it's a, reasonable drive. So go ahead and click forward if you would, Brent. 14-hour drive from Minneapolis to Cook City, Montana. Cook City is just outside of Yellowstone National Park in the northeast corner. It's a 2.5-hour flight into Bozeman or Billings. Pick your poison. My routine, I usually drive to Bismarck after dinner, spend the night in Bismarck, finish the drive the next day, and I'm fishing that afternoon. If you're feeling gutsy, you can just leave in the morning and drive all the way there and put on your backpack and start hiking. I've done that many times too. I've done more than 50 trips out to this area. I've spent more than 100 nights in the backcountry fishing the alpine lakes as well. So I may not be smart, but I've done a lot of trial and error. So hopefully I can kind of eliminate some errors for you guys. So if you wouldn't mind clicking forward, we'll zoom in a little bit here on Cook City just to kind of get your bearings. We've got Billings in the upper right-hand corner, Bozeman in the upper left, and there's Cook City kind of down in the middle. It's an incredibly beautiful drive down through Red Lodge up the Beartooth Highway. A lot of people just do the drive just for the sights. But why it's great are those two areas. We'll talk about the Beartooth Wilderness, which kind of roughly is kind of where that label is, and then we'll talk about the northeast corner of Yellowstone. So let's get into it. We're going to start with wade fishing, and part of what we love about this area of the park is views like this. And so I'm going to talk about, what do I have here? 1, 2, 3. I've got 4 streams I'm going to talk about here in the northeast corner. What's special about these, if you go ahead and click forward, is, so here's the 4 streams I'm going to talk about, Soda Butte, Lamar, Slough Creek, and then the Black Canyon of the Yellowstone. These are world-class fishing on public water. So there's not a lot of places in the US that can check all these boxes. World-class fishing on public water, super easily wadeable, exception of the Yellowstone and Black Canyon, but the other 3 streams, very, very wadeable. You're sight fishing to fish over 14 inches and fishing almost exclusively with dry flies. There's just not a lot. If you kind of and by the way, these are all native fish, or at least naturally reproducing fish at this point. So if you kind of make that list, how many places can you go where you can sight fish to 14-inch fish and fish dry flies on publicly accessible, wadeable water? The list gets really short really fast. And now if you're like, hey, I want to be able to drive there from Minneapolis, it got even shorter. So over all my years, that's kind of why I've settled into this area. So let's click forward. What's the season? So we're talking about wade fishing the northeast corner of Yellowstone. Starts in July, ends in October. The for sure months that you will have a great experience are August and September. Probably late July through late September are pretty darn consistent. July is snowmelt time, and so depending on the year, it can be. I fished it as early as July 4th. I will say I got really good at knowing exactly when the stream was gonna fall into the channel and was going to be visible. And a couple of years I went out there right after it cleared, and the fishing was terrible. The water was ice cold. The fish just looked shell-shocked. So I'd encourage you wait a little bit into July. By the way, this is my dad here hiking down on Soda Butte Creek. During runoff, this is a lake. So if you kind of have that sense of, oh, maybe it'll be fishable, and no, it's a lake. It's totally unfishable until it drops into the channel. So July through October, I've fished it in October as well. It can definitely be very snowy in October in that area. And the hatches have dropped off a lot. So it's interesting fishing in October, but the prime time is August and September. In terms of gear, really straightforward stuff, 9 foot, 4 to 6 weight. Really the bias towards the heavier weight rod is more for the size of the fly and the wind. So it can be, the more you get into these wide open areas, the windier it can be. So 4 to 6 weight rod works really well. 3 to 5x tippet, you shouldn't need to go below 5x tippet. The fish can be somewhat picky in some of the streams, and I'll talk about that. Going down in tippet is probably not going to help you. It's more about getting a good drift and getting yourself positioned well. I mentioned sight fishing. So what's really amazing about the rivers I'm going to talk about is the opportunity to sight fish. And so like the one thing do not forget is polarized glasses. It's 1,000 times more enjoyable when you feel like you're fishing in an aquarium. It is Montana in the summer. So sunscreen and water, I probably should have done those first. Like those two are really important. A little water purifier, and you won't have to carry a bunch of water for your day on the water. But both of those really important. And then rain gear. It's not really a particularly rainy place, but it can rain. I've gotten snowed on in August, so having that extra layer in your vest or your pack can really be helpful. Next slide, please. So here we are. We're going to talk about Slough Creek here in a minute, and this is a picture of Slough Creek. I want to mention a couple of things about this picture. We're here in a walk and wade section, easily accessible from the road. You can see it's probably a guide and 2 clients kind of straight ahead of me. And then he looks kind of small, but there's another angler a little further upstream. That's crowded for this stream. The holes are fairly far apart. And I'll kind of analyze some holes to talk about. But when they talk about this stream being crowded, it is crowded. There's people in most of the holes during those peak times, but you're not fishing right beside another person. And so even today, Slough Creek is quite fishable. So let's talk about Slough Creek. If you click forward, about a Rush River size, a little bit bigger lower down, a little bit smaller further up, but about a Rush River size stream with, I wouldn't say a lot of 20-inch fish, but there are 20-inch fish in this stream. It is super easy to wade, like lots and lots of places to cross, generally gravel or sand bottom. It's almost never muddy. So this stream is one of the first ones to clear in the northeast corner, and it rarely goes off color all season long. It has prolific hatches, really all of the mayflies that are in this region, caddisflies, stoneflies, and then we'll talk a lot about the terrestrial fishing, but in terms of hatches, it has a lot of hatches. Generally, fishing is in 4 meadow sections. So there's a national park campground, and there's a meadow below that, and then there's a series of 3 meadows above it, and I'll show a couple of maps and talk about this. I rarely, if ever, do not use a dry fly on this stream. You can catch fish on nymphs in lots of places. I go out here because I don't have to put a nymph on. Now, I might put a streamer on occasionally if I'm, depending on kind of circumstances, but I'd say 99% of the time I'm fishing this water with dry flies only. And the dry fly fishing is spectacular. And you have the opportunity, if you like to walk, kind of, walk as far as you want, you'll get less crowds. You will not get 0 crowds anywhere on this river. There will be other anglers that, 20 years ago, you definitely could walk your way to Solitude. That's really not true anymore. Next slide. So the fish in this stream, Yellowstone cutthroats and cut bows. You might occasionally lower down, catch a full-blooded rainbow. Technically, I believe this will be true next year. The National Park Service wants you to kill any true rainbow that you catch in this area of the park. Look, most anglers don't know the difference out there between a cutthroat and a brown trout. So the idea that they could know which one's a rainbow and throw it on the shore, it seems pretty unlikely. But that is what you're technically supposed to do. The average fish on this stream is truly in that 15, 16, 17-inch range. I'll talk about a section where you can find some small fish, but when you walk the shore, you will see these fish, and they are all 15 inches or bigger. And I've gotten up to 23. I've never gotten anything bigger. I've never seen anything bigger. I'll talk about a different stream that has some bigger fish if you like to hunt for the giants. Terrestrials, I say July and August. It's almost all of September as well. It is a terrestrial stream. And I'll show a couple of shots of kind of the territory, you know, what it's like along the shore, and you'll see why. Again, those hatches, a good strong PMD hatch, a good blue wing olive hatch, same exact flies you're using here. You know, number 18 blue wings. I've caught a 20-inch trout below the campground out of blue wing in August. So the blue wing hatch can be anytime you're out there. If you're going out a little later in the year, maybe towards September, they have a cream Baetis hatch. So this is essentially a blue wing olive, except it's cream in color. And by that time of year, the fish are pretty smart. And if you don't have a cream colored Baetis, you will not catch a fish. And if you do, you have a really chance at a really good day. Variety of different drake patterns. So some big mayflies out there. And then they do get both caddis and yellow Sally on Slough Creek. So let's take a look at the different parts of Slough Creek. So this is the easiest section to get at. National Park Campground is denoted by the tent icon. And I've highlighted 3 different parking areas, kind of working back up towards the main road. It's a very popular stretch. So that photo I showed earlier with a couple of folks in it, that's from this stretch. A couple of pieces of advice. The first parking lot up there, you can see there's a series of oxbow lakes. If you park in that area, there will be a path that leads down to the stream. I advise you to stay on that path. It looks like a very fun, lovely walk through the meadow. It quickly turns into, you know, a slog through a swamp if you leave that path. So stay on the path until you get to the creek. Once you get to the creek, it's smooth sailing. While I'm talking about those oxbows, this stretch is popular, but particularly the furthest downstream, way up in the upper left-hand corner of this photo, that oxbow lake, depending on the years, can have enough current flowing through it that fish stay in it all summer long. And I've had some fantastic fishing on that oxbow lake. Stripping leeches, fishing midges. I've never seen another person fish it. So now, you know, watch, you'll all go out there and it'll be packed with people, but that is kind of that's a little bit of a sleeper spot here below the campground for Slough Creek. I mentioned small fish. You can actually fish above the campground. It's a big boulder, kind of fast, high gradient water. And you can catch some small trout in there. So if you kind of get sick of catching these 15-inchers and you want to go catch a 10-incher, very few people fish the canyon above the campground, and it's fun. Lots of pocket water. They're typically quite aggressive. So any of those 3 parking spots, there's actually a 4th one further up that I didn't put on this slide. It's a little bit, I don't think it's as an ideal a spot. These are the easiest ones to get at. You can see particularly the middle one, short walk to the stream, tons of holes to fish, exactly like what you see in that picture. So that's the meadow below the campground. What's it like? There's my friend Jeff, wet wading across from a bison. This is below the campground. You know, again, beautiful fish, just a lovely setting, easily wadeable. I will say, I'll talk a little bit about bison later, but there can be a lot of bison in this stretch. And so be mindful of the bison. I've had to wade low in this stretch. I did have to swim across one time getting pinned by bison. So do kind of like keep your distance from the bison. Let's see, I'm trying to remember what I had next for this. Go ahead and click forward. It can be a bit of a technical fishery. And so I talked a little bit about the terrestrial fishing. So if you look at this photo, you can see these kind of big clumps of kind of turf that have fallen into the creek. This is like typical Slough Creek. This is what you'll see. Those clumps of grass, picture all of them covered with grasshoppers and ants and crickets. The fish hold right against those clumps of grass, all the little eddies that get formed, and you'll see them. I mean, it's crystal clear water. You've got your polarized glasses on. You'll see these fish, 15-inch fish swimming around. You can see this is actually the outside bend, and that's me actually. And so I'm getting ready to cast. I'm on the outside bend, which is kind of a non-traditional position. You'd think you'd stand on the inside and have easy casting lanes. That can work too. Some of these technical fishing, you can find that positioning yourself on the outside and doing a little bit shorter cast and being less visible can help for some of these little more pressured fish. Let's click, yeah, just a couple more fish from this stretch. Yeah, so this kind of, that's a nice healthy, probably 20-inch cut bow from that stretch. That's about a typical fish, about 15-inch. I don't know, that's maybe a cut bow too. So here I am, kind of kneeling down, fishing a section of Slough Creek. My buddy Jeff's on the other side of the stream, thinking it's really funny that I've got this wolf that's now turned around and checking me out. So you can go ahead and click forward. So, my buddy just thought this was freaking hilarious. He said nothing to me until we got to the car at the end of the day. So a lot of great wildlife in this stretch as well. Go ahead and click forward. So next I'm going to talk about some hike-in opportunities. They're simply referred to as the first, second, and third meadows. You can see we've got the municipal campground, the state or the national park campground in the lower left. The three meadows are very generally really similar experience. I'll have some pictures show you how they're different. The trail it's really hard for me to express how easy this trail is to follow. You could literally drive a car up this trail if the national park let you. Above the park boundary, way up here in the upper right, is Frenchie's Meadow and Silvertip Ranch. Silvertip, that ranch owner donated this property to the national park many years ago. They're allowed to bring a cart, as in it looks like 4 radial tires and 2 axles hauling their diesel fuel, and it's a dude ranch up there. And so the third meadow actually gets a lot of pressure dropping down from that ranch. And so the trail is wide enough for them to be able to tow this big cart up there. And you might see it, they do, I think, 2 trips a week. 1 hauling people in and 2 hauling them back out. So in addition to the easy to follow trail, there are backcountry campsites. So these are reservable in advance. You can either throw your tent in your backpack and head on up. You can also have an outfitter do what they call a drop camp. And so they'll haul all your gear up on mules and horses, and you can either walk up or ride a horse. They'll drop you off and come back and get you a week later. Done both, pretty fun. There's actually, I list these 5 backcountry sites. There's actually 2 other ones, but they're quite a ways from the stream. And so these are the 5 that are really, it's really a wonderful experience, any of those 5 sites. Go ahead and click forward. So here we are, we're looking downstream at the first meadow. And so you can get a sense of kind of the scale. That's probably, I don't know, maybe 2 miles across, 2.5 miles across. Right in the center of that picture, that little kind of pass between those 2 hills is where you'd come down. Go ahead and click forward. So again, this is kind of classic water in the first meadow. You kind of can't miss the stream, by the way, in the first meadow. You'll hike up over a hill. You'll go down the other side. It's about an hour walk, and the trail dumps you right next to an enormous bend in the creek. So you can't miss it. You can just start fishing right there and start working your way upstream. Go ahead and click forward. It's a little less crowded than below the campground, and at least the last couple of years, I think it's been less crowded than the second meadow. Everyone's read books that told them the further away you hike, the less crowded it gets, and they all go to the second meadow because it's about as far as you can walk in a day. I've actually been fishing the first meadow a little more the last few years because it's actually quite a bit less crowded. Again, a little bit of a technical fishery. You can see, I don't know who this guy was, just chatted with him and took his picture. But again, he's positioned on that outside bend as well. And so you'll see that can be a pretty productive position. Really, this whole glassy, smooth, slick area, all of that shoreline, every one of those little clumps could hold a fish. Most of the time, I recommend that anglers sight fish. So look for a fish, cast to a fish, don't blind fish. You don't need to blind fish in most cases. Fish are often rising throughout the day, and so even if you can't see them under the water, you can see them when they stick their nose up. So I strongly encourage folks to sight fish. Oh, I will give you one. Oh yeah, I got a couple of little fish pictures here too. I will give you one little tip, and it takes me a little getting used to every time I go out there. How many people have fished for Yellowstone cutthroats before? All right, maybe a third of the folks in the room. They have a very distinct rise. And so a Yellowstone cutthroat sticks like the front half of its head out of the water, and it hangs there and waits for the bug to fly, to get into its mouth, and then lowers it. What that means as an angler is when it sticks its head out, if you set the hook, you're getting nothing because the fly's not in there yet. And so I always kind of have that. It's like almost a full second after you see the nose go out of the water before you set the hook. So if you're getting bites and you're not hooking, you're probably setting too soon. So that's first meadow. We're going to kind of say goodbye to the first meadow and head up to the second. So just like that, we hiked another hour and a half. And here we are. We're kind of maybe in the upper third of the second meadow. Let's see, what I have a couple, go ahead and click forward. It's about a 2.5 hour hike to this hole. Again, trails just as easy to follow. I think it's the same crowd as the first meadow. This is the meadow that has the backcountry sites. There's no sites in the first meadow, although there is a ranger cabin there. But I think 1, 2, 3 of the, well, 3.5 of the sites are here. One is in that point of trees. Yeah, it's again, you can see really not much has changed. It's pretty much the same stream that you saw down below. I'll talk a little bit about maybe this hole, just to give you a sense of where fish hold. Would you go back a slide, Brent? So, sorry, go for it. Yeah, right there. So I've spent an entire day on that hole. If I get up early, leave the trailhead at 7, I'm here at 9:30. Pretty much got to be back on the trail by, between 4 and 5. I don't like hiking after dark with the bears around. So whatever that is, I spent the whole day at this hole. And where are the fish? They are throughout the entire hole. You can see the boulder down below and the little curve on the far bank. There might be 10 fish just in that bottom little section. They'll be hung out against that far bank. That's about a 3-foot deep pool. They'll be cruising that entire pool left to right. You can wade right in the middle of it and just stand there and fish to fish for hours. That upper riffle area, obviously more bug activity. So, overlapping hatches throughout the day. You don't have to pound a lot of water on Slough Creek to find fish. And you don't have to leave a hole. You can spend a long time at a hole and probably still be very productive. Let's click forward. Let's see. Yeah, that's a 23-inch cut bow from that hole. That I think I'd probably fish that hole for 3 hours before I got that fish. And he took some foam monstrosity, like just some big, huge, ugly, no finesse whatsoever. Yeah. Anyway, so that gives you a sense. Now, boom, we're going to go up to the third meadow. Actually, this is right at the junction between the third and the fourth meadow. And so this is actually the campsite number 4 on the creek. Yeah, so third meadow, go ahead and click. It's really not, I don't think it's worth the long walk for a day hike. Like if you're going to fish the third meadow, you should really be staying overnight. You're going to spend most of your time walking. It's for sure a 3-hour hike. It's probably more like 3.5 each way. So you're at 7 hours and you haven't strung up your rod yet. The trail, again, super easy to follow. I say slightly less crowded. It's more of a different crowd in the third meadow. You get the guys who are on there, they got their trail runners and they're like uber fit and they ran up there with their fly rod. You get a few of those guys. Mainly you get a lot of folks, clients from Silvertip. Outside the park, it's not catch and release. The fishing up at Silvertip is not very good because they keep all the fish. And so where do they go to catch fish? They come down into the park. Nothing wrong with it, just kind of a different crowd. There are a couple more campsites available up in the third meadow as well. They don't allow them. Nope. Good question. A little more open up here. You can see even in that previous shot, you can kind of feel the elevation you've gained a little bit. You're getting up towards kind of the top of the meadow here. A little more gravelly, a little less kind of that turf, but the fishing seems just pretty much the same. Go ahead and click forward. So that's Slough Creek. Bison can be throughout this range. There's definitely bears in the Slough Creek Valley. So bear spray and bear precautions are in order. They're not the little cute cuddly kind, or some of them aren't. So be mindful of that. Oh, you can see here too, I usually bring a water purifier. I'm camping, I'm backpacking in this trip, but I'll just bring a water purifier and then I don't have to carry a bunch of water around. I'll just purify what I need when I go to drink.
What size is that first campground?
The national park one?
Yeah.
Boy, what does that have? Maybe 15 or 20 sites. It's pretty much wait in the morning for someone to leave and grab their spot.
It's tough to get.
They're tough to get. They're tough to get. You can kind of spend a half a day screwing around trying to get a site at that spot.
That campsite, that one you have to hike into, or can you drive the campsite?
Nope, drive your car right to it.
Online reserve ahead of time?
No. No. You can reserve the backcountry. I'll repeat these questions. We had a question about how big is the campground, the national park campground. I think it's around 15 or 20 sites. And then there was a question about whether it's reservable, which it's not. The backcountry sites, however, are reservable. They'll hold a portion of them for walk-in folks, so they don't reserve all of them. And they have a great website, recreation.gov, where you can go and do that reservation for the backcountry sites. And the shortest hike is probably, it's not, maybe 2 hours at the most is the shortest hike to that first campsites 1 and 2. They're really pretty close to each other. I briefly, so someone mentioned the hill. There is a hill. I'm going to talk about alpine backpacking, and so I really don't count this hill, but it is steep, and it's right away on the hike. So if you're going to hike to the first meadow, number one, I would not wear your waders. It's usually hot. I've done it. It's miserable. But there is a fairly steep hill. It's maybe, I don't know, 200 feet or 250 feet of elevation gain. But it's kind of like, not straight up, there's switchbacks, but I think a lot of people start to question their decision partway through that portion of the hike. I assure you that it's over and then the rest of it's downhill, and it's intense but brief. Take your time, don't stress about it. Okay, let's leave Slough Creek. I love Slough Creek, and we're going to shift over to Soda Butte. Soda Butte Creek is east and north of Slough Creek. Both of those streams, I think Slough Creek's about an hour drive from Cook City. Soda Butte is more like a half an hour, maybe around that. It's roughly think Whitewater State Park size. You can see this is a braided section, but you can see it's a fairly small stream. It is, again, sight fishing to what they're picky fish. Why they're picky? Well, it's easy to wade. It's right next to the road. It's small. In the last 6 or 7 years, it's gotten really, really, really popular. And so I'll talk a little bit about maybe some things to try to mitigate that. Soda Butte can get muddy, unlike Slough Creek. So thunderstorms usually cause the stream to get muddy. It clears pretty quickly, though. So maybe a day later, it's clear. It has fantastic hatches. Again, drakes, PMDs, betas, terrestrials. They get a mahogany hatch in September. It's a great little stream. But those hatches are all below the Soda Butte. And so let's go ahead and click forward. That in the upper left-hand corner, that is the Soda Butte. It smells like sulfur. It's not very big, but it pours mineral-laden water into Soda Butte Creek. Downstream of that butte is fantastic insect life and great fishing. Upstream of the butte, there's a lot of streams with kind of those, smaller cutthroat. It's perfectly fine. It's beautiful. But the really amazing fishing is all below that Soda Butte. And that Soda Butte is, I think, roughly the upper right-hand corner of this picture. And you can see there's kind of 4, you wouldn't fish really up right next to the butte. So these 3 parking areas down below are the areas along Soda Butte. I think I mentioned in that previous slide, there is 0 solitude on Soda Butte. Expect to see other folks, be polite. They're usually polite. Everyone's having a great time, but it's not the kind of solitude location. Let's go ahead and click forward. I mentioned prolific hatches, lots of this, guide and client. Dense wildlife, so really, really, really common to have bison along this stretch. A lot of wolves along this stretch as well. It's very close to the road. It's a super short walk. Go ahead and click forward. So that's my dad headed downstream. We're probably 5 minutes from the car at this point. 15 to 18-inch fish. Again, the little fish are all above the butte. 20-inch is a big fish, at least in this stretch. Again, same kind of drill as Slough Creek. Again, same kind of drill in terms of hatches. These guys are picky. They get smart really fast. So if you enjoy watching a fish come up and pick the rubber leg on your terrestrial, These are the fish that will pick the rubber leg on your terrestrial. I've seen that a lot. They will pick the rubber leg, they'll ease back down and watch and see if the bug moves properly, and then they will come up and eat it. I've seen them do it to a natural. They will come up and grab the leg of a grasshopper and then go down, and when the grasshopper switches, then they'll grab it. Very picky, but super fun. I mean, it's just a neat little stream. And so here's my dad again, fishing that outside edge. It's trickier casting, but it can be very, very productive. One other little tip for this stream, would you mind going back a slide? So this stretch that, this isn't quite right, but like where my dad's standing there in this picture, imagine the current was flowing the other direction off of that riffle. It's flowing to the left, but imagine it were flowing to, or no, wait. I think that one's flowing in both directions. It's actually flowing to the right. You will see fish all along that riffle, like right behind, like where my dad is standing, there will be fish. Like, look, that's ankle water, if that. So a lot of the folks who fish this stream fish the big obvious bends and corners, and the fish know that. And so you can, like, we've had tremendous fishing on these incredibly shallow little riffles. And if you sit there and watch really carefully, you'll see their little noses come up. And so again, you know, there's some really obvious holes and you catch fish in the obvious holes, but if you're going to fish this stream, I'd encourage you to really take your time and look at some of the areas that don't look fishy. You might be shocked how many fish are in them. Let's go ahead and click forward a couple. Yeah, it's just unbelievably beautiful. So this is a really rare picture. There's no anglers. It would be fairly common along this stretch. And by the way, you can see in the lower right, this is the log that marks the parking areas. So there's like cars are right there. This is the view. It would be common to see 15 anglers in that picture nowadays. So why are people excited about Soda Butte Creek? This is someone's video I grabbed off the internet. This is why people love Soda Butte Creek. Like, you just get to sit there and watch these guys come up and chow on something, God knows what some days. But yeah, just a beautiful little stream. And again, you see this vegetation right along the water, the fish kind of hanging in that channel. It's really a neat stretch. All right, enough about Soda Butte. Very popular. It's a fun little stream. By the way, I love it at dusk. So I will fish Soda Butte until it's pitch dark. And I can do very well on Soda Butte, like getting on the river at, say, between 5 and 6. The guides are long gone. Most of the clients are gone, and fish until dark. You can do quite well. Just emergers. It doesn't seem to matter much that time of day. All right, now we're going to switch gears and talk to Lamar. I use the term western sized river, like it's a big river. It's wide open, so cast away. It's wide open, so there's wind. It's wadeable, but you have to pick your spots. You cannot, unlike Soda Butte, you can cross virtually anywhere. Slough, you can cross virtually anywhere. Lamar, you have to pick your spots to cross. It's often muddy, like a lot. Like it's muddy all the time. It's probably more easy to talk about the days it's not muddy. And so it's a fun river to find. If you get there, it's not muddy, I'd encourage you to try it. It's just a neat stream. Both the fish and the hatches are really spread out. So if you see a beautiful hole and you're fishing it and you're getting nothing, move on. There may be no fish in that hole. So again, like Slough, I encourage you to kind of walk the banks and look for fish. Often on Lamar, everything's bigger, the bank is bigger. You could be 15 feet above the river looking down and see a beautiful hole. If you don't see any fish, there probably aren't any fish. So try to really focus your fishing in spots where you see fish. There's 4 sections I'll talk about. One is above Soda Butte Creek. There's a section between Soda Butte and the canyon, commonly referred to as the Lamar Valley. There's a canyon section, and then there's a section below when it drops into the Yellowstone. I think unlike any of the other streams I've talked about so far, the Lamar, you can definitely walk your way to Solitude. You do not see those same folks, super uber fit guys with their trail runners. I don't see them doing Lamar. They like the trail on Slough Creek. So, you know, there's probably 10 or 11 miles in the Lamar Valley of river, and a bunch of it is a couple miles from the road with no trail. So you can walk your way to Solitude on the Lamar. So let's click forward. I'm not going to spend a ton of time. It is kind of like the Serengeti of the Yellowstone. It is one of the most popular wildlife viewing areas in the park for all of these reasons. These are all pictures from the Lamar. Well, I've cheated. That's that same black wolf from Slough Creek, but I've seen, it's probably a different black wolf, but I've seen black wolves in the Lamar Valley too. Just, you're going to catch fish, but like stop and look around. I mean, it is an incredible, incredible location. Let's see. Yeah, it's just a beautiful, beautiful stream. Bigger water, more wildlife, long walk, pockets to fish. Look forward. So here's kind of my crappy little map of this section. The upper section above Soda Butte Creek, easily accessed from the lower parking lots on Soda Butte. The fishing's okay. It's not great. The fish are smaller. You can fish all the way up to Cache Creek is kind of the next creek up. It's okay. I think you can do better. If you're just sick of the crowd on Soda Butte, there's definitely lot less people fishing this section. And you can get into some good numbers of, 10, 12-inch fish. The yellow section is the section I encourage you to explore. You can see it goes quite a ways away from the road. It is just a remarkable stretch of river. Below that is the canyon. The only thing I'll say about the canyon is it is very steep. There's a lot of water and there's some big fish in the canyon. Big fish. So if you like, big streamers and you want to catch a 24-inch cutthroat, I can't tell you will, but if I were doing it, that's where I would do it. And when I've done it, that's where I've done it. I can say there used to be a fly shop in Cook City, and when I went in to tell them how proud I was of this 23-inch fish they caught, they were like, oh, that's not bad. And then they proceeded to show me 26-inch plus fish from the canyon. So different fishing. I'm not going to get into it in depth, but big, deep water for, sinking lines and no room for a back cast. It's an interesting little spot. And then the lower stretch, which connects the Yellowstone River. I haven't fished that much, honestly. I think Paul Johnson has. So if you see him, he can tell you a little bit about that stretch. This picture behind the map, I think it's a great example of the type of spot I really like on the Lamar. That little back eddy next to the turf, a root wad in front, a riffle to the right. This is the kind of spot that's probably going to hold fish. There's some big sweeping corners with all this gravel and they look amazing, and some of them hold fish and some of them don't. These spots tend to hold fish quite well. Bigger variety of size on the Lamar. So setting aside the canyon, I don't think I've caught a 20-inch fish on the Lamar. A lot of 12 to 18s, just bigger. I actually, now that I remember, I did catch one on a stonefly once. But 20-inch fish again is big here. Cutthroats and cutbows. Same hatch chart, although they do get a salmon fly hatch. It's brief. Golden stones are a little more common, so you might see some golden stones on this stretch. So that is the Lamar. Beautiful, really beautiful. A little funny joke, if the trees on the far end there, I think I've got my orientation right, that little batch of trees used to be a picnic ground. And the state park the national park finally took it out because, there were two things that loved that picnic ground: tourists and bison. And it was just this constant source of problems between the tourists and the bison. So they just took the picnic ground out. And we're like, we can't control the bison, but we can control the tourists. All right. Last river. How am I doing time-wise here? Good. Last river, Black Canyon section of the Yellowstone. So this is the Yellowstone River. It's big. The Black Canyon is a remote canyon in the north end of the park. It roughly connects the lower falls of the Yellowstone to the exit of the park. It is clearly not even remotely crossable. I think I found one spot where if I really felt like it, I could have gone across. But it's about a 2-hour walk, and it's generally very lightly fished. I think I could count on, I rarely see another fisherman when I go back there for a day hike. So it's a neat little spot. Again, 2-hour walk, not too bad each way. The full cornucopia of fish species, so cutthroats, rainbows, cutbows, browns, brooks, whitefish. It's all in this stretch. As you might expect, a river that size, you are only going to be able to fish the side you're on. And the good news is there is a bridge, a footbridge, and so you can pick which side you want to fish for the day. The fish are in pockets. Like there are long stretches that are totally not worth fishing. And I'll show you a picture of a spot that's good. It's not sight fishing. So here the fish are generally pretty aggressive, pretty cooperative to kind of attractor type patterns. And you're just fishing good looking water and probably catching fish. Unlike any of the streams I've talked about today, multiple times I've fished this stream with a 2-fly dry rig, like a big foam fly and a small ant, and caught 2 fish on 1 cast more than once. So there are good numbers of aggressive fish in this stretch. There are both bears and rattlesnakes, as well as cactus, oddly enough, in this little valley. So bring your bear protection. So 2-hour hike. The hike I really like is Blacktail Creek. There's a couple of different ways to get at the Black Canyon. The Blacktail Creek trailhead, it's a fairly lightly used trailhead, primarily backcountry hikers are using it, not fishermen. Again, it says it's about a 2-hour hike, kind of a lovely little walk. And it ends at a backcountry bridge. So let's click forward. That is quite a bridge. So this is the suspension bridge over the Black Canyon. The year of the flood, by the way, what was that, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? The big flood in the northeast corner of the park. I came here, I came and fished this stretch fairly shortly after the flood receded. And the flood waters, it's really hard to get scale from this picture. We're probably 30 feet above the water. And the water was around here on the tree. Like it was, you can kind of see the wash mark on those far banks, but anyway. So I'm looking back towards where you would be coming if you hike down the Blacktail Creek Trail. And so you can fish either side of the river. I usually cross, but it's probably just habit at this point. Go ahead and click forward. There's in fact, they're on both sides. There are a smaller number on the near side to the Blacktail Creek. On the far side, it's a trail. It's a long trail that essentially connects the town of Gardner, goes all the way up through the Black Canyon and connects to other backcountry trails. I don't remember how many sites there are. There's a bunch. And they're lovely. Well, some of them are. But a lot of them are near the river. It's really a neat little section. And again, usually when I see fishermen back here, they're camping in the backcountry sites and they're probably throwing spinners, most of them, which actually can be quite productive on this stretch of water. Big water, hungry trout. I like attractors or streamers. They have to be single hook in the park. So if you've got articulated streamers with 2 hooks, you got to snip one of them off. I recommend the front one to cut off, leave the back one. But anything from a good size woolly bugger or leech pattern, sex dungeon, some of those kind of smaller streamers can do really well on this stretch. I can remember a day in which I fished upstream and had a very slow morning fishing upstream with my dry fly attractors, and I put on an articulated streamer and I caught just fish after fish after fish. So be flexible in this stretch of water. Again, it's big water, so you're only going to fish the edges. Just ignore the other side of the river, ignore the middle of the river. You can't fish it effectively. If you click forward, I'll show you. This is an example of a really good hole. So one more click. These are all the spots that held fish in this hole when I fished through it. There was actually quite a few more. I just got sick of drawing circles, but you can see this kind of little soft area next to this fast water held fish. Above, there's this sunken boulder here, and there's a slick next to that held fish. The very tail of the next one held fish. They'll line up along these edges. And then if you go around the corner, you'd see that it was just not worth fishing. It was a bunch of kind of high gradient, shallow water. So you're looking for kind of these soft edges with a little bit of depth. Most all of them will hold fish. It does get a salmon fly hatch. And so if you get lucky, I've had a couple of years where I got lucky, it can be truly amazing. So these fish are just chowing on salmon flies. Most of the years, the salmon fly hatch is going to coincide with high water. But I've had salmon fly hatches in this upper part of the Black Canyon, even around the Tower Bridge area into early August, when the river's, the salmon flies should be long gone. I have no idea why they're there, but I think this fish was an August fish on a salmon fly. And those salmon flies, I think, were from that same day. If you're unlucky, you will get to the river the week after the salmon fly hatch. And so I encourage you to look for that too. If you see a whole bunch of salmon fly carcasses, you might consider just relaxing and enjoying the view. The fishing's probably not going to be very good. So that is the Black Canyon. 15-inch average fish. They can get smaller. It's just a broader variety of size. Again, all species. I really like ants and golden strones in this section. That fish, which I didn't tape it, it was probably 21, I'm guessing, took a leech. So, so that is my wade section of this presentation. We're going to touch briefly on alpine lakes, and I'll take some questions here at the end on the others. So let's switch gears and talk lakes. Oh, flies. I'll just mention a couple. Upper right-hand corner, longhorn beetle, blue ribbon fly shops out of West Yellowstone have kind of popularized this fly. I don't know how this thing keeps working. It continues to work. Like I will throw it over a fish that has clearly just been fished to, and it will come up and take the longhorn beetle, whatever. So that's a pattern out of blue ribbon flies. Middle of the left-hand side, that's a cream Baetis pattern from that same fly shop. So those are, like if I only had one fly, I'd probably reluctantly take the longhorn beetle because it really works. All right, let's talk mountain lakes. So there's me and a friend's son approaching a lake. Let's go ahead and click forward. We're going to talk about the Beartooth Plateau. So this is a vast expanse above 10,000 feet in elevation that straddles Montana and Wyoming. There are 900 plus lakes. 30% of them contain trout and 10 of them are stocked. 10% of them are stocked. So you've got about 90 lakes that are stocked. Those lakes are usually stocked for size. So they're putting fish in, they're leaving them in there for, could be as many as 8 years before the next batch comes in. By the way, the difference between the 30% and the 10% is almost all brook trout. So there are prolific brook trout populations to the point of being pests. But it's super fun. And so if you want to go catch some small brookies in alpine lakes, there's no shortage of them. Most lakes that you're going to fish are 5 to 10 acres. There's virtually no vehicle access to any of these lakes. So get your strap on your shoes. So let's click forward. This is a Google Earth view. I just want to kind of show you the swath kind of running lower left to upper right. See all those little lakes. That is the Beartooth Plateau. If you click forward, here's a map from Montana, fish and game, like that's a lot of lakes. And one thing, click back a slide. Backwards, actually, the other way. There we go. You can see there's not like big canyons in that plateau. And so what that means is, go ahead and click forward, you can probably get to most of these lakes. Like you can go from one lake to the next lake. You don't have to like go way down the valley and then go up another valley. Like you can kind of hop lake to lake. So let's click forward. Again, a lot of brook trout up there, most of them small. They're delicious. Keep as many as you want. Yellowstone cutthroat and golden trout are pretty much the only two they're stocking these days. They used to stock rainbows. Yeah, go ahead. Yes, yeah, and I'll talk a little bit about the trail system too. Good question. But they used to stock rainbows. They've pretty much eliminated them for fear of crossbreeding and whirling disease and these other things. And so they're pretty much stocking Yellowstone cutthroat and a few goldens and a few lakes. There are a few grayling. I've seen less and less over the years. If you catch a grayling, it's kind of a neat deal. The stocking schedule drives the size. So think in year 3, those are 12-inch fish. Don't bother fishing to them in years 1 and 2. They're small. But in year 5, those are 18-inch fish. Again, depending on the insect population and the food source in the lake. So let's go ahead and click forward. Yeah, Yellowstone cutthroat, brook trout, a couple of goldens from the Beartooth Mountains.
Stocking schedule published?
Yes, and I'm going to show you something in a moment about how to get that. Go ahead and click forward. So backpacking in the Beartooth, late July to August. You can often go up there in July. The biting flies are horrendous. So if you talk to locals, they will say, we don't go up there in July. We wait for the first frost which usually happens sometime during July and knocks the biting fly insect population down. That's why and it's also, of course, a little drier in August. So I tend to prefer August over July for that reason. But timing is obviously based on snow melt. So one of those years where like we didn't get any snow, they didn't get any snow, and I went out there on July 4th. Most years think August 4th. So August is kind of the sweet spot. By the way, you can do it later. It's cold and dark a lot. And so you kind of want long days. You can do everything from overnight hikes to kind of as long as you can, as much food as you can carry. You can stay back there as long as you want. There's an extensive trail network. A primary trail is euphemistically and in guidebooks called the beaten path. It is a really easy to follow trail that kind of traverses the Beartooth Plateau from east to west. There are a ton of off-trail options. I'm going to recommend two trailheads. The Clark's Fork trailhead, which is on the west end close to Cook City. It's a little lower elevation, so you got some uphill to get to the lakes. Or Island Lake trailhead, which is up towards the top, and that you're starting at 9,000 feet and it's fairly flat hiking. You can do car camping as well up at the top. Oh, this little website down here on the bottom, that's just a good spot to go and see how the snowpack's doing. Let's click forward. Gear, 4 to 6 weight, 9-foot rod. Floating line for sure. Intermediate and sinking lines are useful as well. I encourage you to bring a net. They don't weigh very much, and often you're on kind of these rocky shorelines. You want to treat the fish nicely if you're not going to eat it, and a net really helps you kind of get it unhooked and back in the water. In terms of flies, midge patterns, mayflies, scuds, beetles and ants, again, woolly buggers can be really effective up there. Again, these don't see a lot of pressure, and caddisflies. Scuds for sure. There's lots of scuds in these lakes. So go ahead and click forward. In my opinion, fishing success on these lakes, the number one thing you can do is research the lake before you put your backpack on. And I'll have a website in a minute on that. Make sure you're going to a lake that has fish. Lots, again, remember 30% of the 900 lakes have fish. 70% have zero fish. No matter how good an angler you are, you will not catch fish if there aren't any in the lake. The second is don't immediately start casting. Like take some time and observe the lake. Think about where you're going. If you're looking for a simple thing to do, fish the inlet and the outlet. Those usually will support good populations of fish. Next best thing, look for shallow areas with drop-offs. And silty bottoms are better than the boulder gardens. So most of the insects are going to tend to hold where there's some silt. Go ahead and click forward. So on the Montana side, most of these lakes are on the Montana side, although there's a fair number in Wyoming. You can go to this website, that's the Montana Fish and Wildlife Service, and every single lake in the Beartooth Plateau has a hydro map. It has the route that they used to get there. They survey these lakes every year. They're up there surveying a section of lakes, and so they will tell you that some of them are kind of funny to read, like this is going to be a miserable hike no matter how you do it, but we went up this draw. But they will tell you a route to get there. They'll have survey data. So when they go up there, they put a net out and then they try to fish and see what they catch. And then they'll list the stocking data along with the historical stocking data so you can see what's been put in here over time.
Do you know if most of that data is on Onyx?
I'm sorry?
Onyx, the app?
I don't know. I just used the website to get to that data. So that's the research part. Great website, great way to kind of good thing to do in the winter. So let's click forward. So here's a lake. This is if I remember right, this is a golden trout lake. Where would I fish this lake? It's pretty straightforward. There's the inlet. I'd start there. You can kind of see in this picture, this is a grassy bank as opposed to the opposite shore with that big kind of granite plunging into the lake. So this is going to tend to be more silty. I'll tend to fish this side. And you can kind of see the nature of that far bay. You've got lots of exposed rock. The odds are that's a little bit shallower too. And so those are going to be the spots I'll fish. Go ahead. It can be a surprising insect population up at 10,000 feet. So this is 10,500 feet. That's my tent. It was covered with mayflies by the afternoon. you can have a great caddis population. This little guy was in a 10,000-foot lake, as well as stoneflies. So I've seen little yellow stoneflies up at 10,000 feet as well. So this is, if you can see some bug life, you're in good shape. But mainly, why are you up here catching trout? You can catch stock trout in lots of places. You're up there because it looks like this. Every day, it never rains, never snows. No. This is, yeah, you can see it's probably going to rain in an hour. But it's beautiful. Tons of lakes like this. Go ahead and click forward. Beautiful, beautiful lake. And so, if you time everything right and you're lucky, go ahead and click forward. You can get a day like this. Go ahead and click forward. Those are fish. These are all about 15-inch Yellowstone cutthroats. This is a lake that is not stocked. It actually has natural reproduction. And so these guys had all, like this guy might be trying to spawn. He's not going to successfully spawn here, but there's a little feeder creek. They were up spawning in that feeder creek. And then the guys who were done spawning were over here chowing. So, there are some lakes that have naturally reproducing populations. Some of them are well documented. Some of them aren't. They only get to, I think they cycle through all the stocked lakes every decade. So a lot of those lakes haven't been seen in more than 10 years by Fish and Wildlife. So that's just a little teaser on alpine backpacking. You can go ahead and click forward. A little bit of what the trail looks like. So kind of starting on the left, this low elevation trail. That is literally part of the beaten path. You'll kind of, coming out of Clark's Fork, you'll work your way up kind of some canyon areas. You'll get up in higher elevation, the third picture, and then you'll crown whatever pass you're going over and find yourself in a nice little lake. So that's just a brief, I could do a whole nother hour on this stuff, but that's just a brief little bit on backpacking and fishing the alpine lakes. So that's, oh yeah, lots of wildlife. Like this goat, I had that family of goats. That goat right there, I couldn't find the video to post. He got so close to my boots, I finally wiggled my toes because I was worried he was going to chew on them. And goats look really cute, but when they're that close to you, it's but yeah, lots of wildlife. I will say I almost never see bears in August up high. I don't think I've ever seen one up high. That bear was from the hike into Black Canyon, Yellowstone, but lots of wildlife. And you get this for your dinner time view. All right, so that's what I had. I'm happy to take questions.
Last question, can you repeat it?
Of course. Yeah, happy to.
You don't recommend waders because they're cumbersome. So what do you wear for footwear?
Oh, good question. Yeah, good question. The question was about bringing waders. I have occasionally and regretted it every time. They're heavy. I mean, like seriously heavy, particularly going out when they're wet. I rarely need to wade is the short answer. Very rarely. If you think about it, most of these lakes, that hydro chart I showed of that one lake, if you looked at the lake, you wouldn't have imagined it was 130 feet deep. They drop off. And if they're not deep enough, the fish all die over winter. So they're only stocked in the deep lakes. And you're only able to catch them up on the shelf. And so.
But how about like a little river?
Oh, good question. Yeah, so Soda Butte, Slough, Lamar, a lot of people wet wade, particularly hiking up Slough Creek. I will say often if I'm going up to day hike the Second Meadow, I will bring my waders. It's only for the day and I'm not bringing a bunch of food and other stuff, so I don't mind carrying them.
Bring wading shoes too, or do you?
If I'm bringing my waders, I'm usually putting them in a backpack and I'm wearing sneakers or hiking boots, something comfortable for the walk, and then I'll change into the waders once I get up there. Yeah.
Do you ever get like intense mosquitoes in Slough Creek? I mean, the one time, I think it was July, it must have been warm.
Yeah.
Right? But there were intense bugs, not just mosquitoes, but flies.
Black flies. Yeah, Slough Creek. The question was about biting flies on Slough Creek in particular. The upper meadows of Slough, particularly in July, can be buggy. I will say that's the exception, not the rule. Most of the time that I'm fishing that section, I'm rarely even bothering with bug spray. But if you do hit it early and you hit that black fly hatch, it's kind of miserable. Yeah, but that's a very small window of the season up there. Most of the time, there's not a lot of biting flies. Soda Butte gets a decent mosquito hatch at dusk, I will say that. Yeah.
Talk about catch and release.
Yeah, so in the park, it's all catch and release for cutthroats. I mentioned the crazy rule about killing rainbows. I mean, I understand why they're trying to do it. I just don't think it's working.
All the streams you talked about.
Yep, all the wade streams, those are all catch and release only. That's why the fishing's good. And all barbless, single hook barbless, catch and release only. No lead too, by the way. So if you're still using lead shot, you can't in the park. I wouldn't recommend using, stick to dry flies anyway. Outside of the park in the Beartooth Plateau, keep anything you want. I mean, within reason, you're backpacking, so you're gonna eat that night what you keep. So other questions? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Will you be sharing the slides?
Yes. Yeah. Well, this is recorded, so you can rewatch the whole thing. We'll get the slide deck out to you guys with the web links. And you got my email here on the back, and you'll see me at chapter meetings. If you ever are thinking about planning a trip, I'm going, I'm doing at least one backpacking trip, often 2 a year, and then another few trips out there fishing. So I'm usually watching what's going on if you just want to know. Great. Another question? Yeah.
Is Cook City sort of where the base would be if you're not?
I like Cook City. Yeah. It has no cell service, so I really like that. And the internet is truly awful. So it's got all of those things. There's really two towns. Cook City's slightly bigger, and then Silvergate is like, I don't know why they're two towns. The one's like a mile away. But they both have, quite a bit of accommodation. So a number of motels and hotels in both towns, and some good little restaurants too.
Like, I would just throw out that I fly into Bozeman.
Yeah.
And then, go in through Gardner, going.
Yeah.
to the north entrance.
Yep. It's faster. If you fly into Bozeman, you're going to want to go through Gardner. If you're flying into Billings, you're going to go through Cook City.
Cheaper though?
No, they're virtually identical nowadays. Every year, they just recently changed the flight schedule. It used to be that Bozeman had a little better flight schedule, but Billings is one of the fastest growing towns in the US right now. So it's gotten popular.
About fly shops.
There is one not very good fly shop in Cook City. Sorry, it's not very good. So I recommend, probably trying to have all your flies ahead of time. If you do fly into Bozeman and go through Gardner, there's a number of good fly shops in Gardner. I really like Parks Fly Shop, which is right outside the park. But I'm sure there's other really good fly shops in Gardner as well. Yeah.
Where was the plateau in relationship to, let's say, Cook City?
Good question. The question was, where's the plateau in relation to Cook City? I mentioned two trailheads. The western trailhead of Clark's Fork is probably, 2-3 miles east of Cook City. So right outside of Cook City. Say that? Oh, the other trailhead is Island Lake. And it's kind of right up, it's next, the question was, where was the other trailhead? The Island Lake trailhead is right next to the Top of the World store, which is this tiny little store up at the top of the plateau. But it's a really nice campground. It's got lots of sites, and you're up on the plateau. You're already at 9,000 feet. So it eliminates it eliminates that first 2,000 feet elevation or 1,500 feet.
On the Beartooth Highway, yeah.
It's right. Yes. Sorry. Yes. That Island Lake campground's right off the Beartooth Highway. It is in Wyoming. So if you're going to fish directly adjacent to that, you'll need a Wyoming license. I encourage you to bring both. I did run into a ranger, like what the hell? So I was glad I had both permits. For questions?
Hey, Mike. we have,
Online questions?
Yeah, we have some questions on the Zoom.
Sure.
So the first question is from Morris Lewis, and wondering if you've ever used llamas to hike in.
Oh, yeah. So the online question was about the use of pack animals, particularly llamas. I've never used either, but I've seen more llamas than goats, but I've seen both used, llamas and goats. I will say some of the off-trail routes are very passable to people, but not at all passable to horses. And I'm not sure how a goat would do. I suppose it would do fine. I don't know how it does with a bunch of stuff packed on it, but I can barely, take care of my dog at home. So I'm not going to try and take care of the llama. Next online question, Bob.
Yeah, from Brad Murdoch, who's wondering if there are any other kinds of protection used regarding wildlife other than bear spray.
No, just bear spray. I will say when I've talked to rangers in the backcountry, they obviously carry a sidearm and pepper spray. And more than once, the rangers have told me the sidearm is for people. The pepper spray is for the bears. And so, you're not gonna, look, I've done a fair amount of shooting. You're not gonna be able to shoot a bear when it's charging you. You're probably gonna wet yourself. And so you're better off just trying to do the big, huge spray of pepper. I will say over all the years I've gone out there, I can count on one hand the number of bear encounters I've had, and they were virtually all involved the bear like seeing me and running away. So.
Okay, next question is from Dean and Luke. Do you have any thoughts or experiences fishing on Pebble Creek?
Yeah, so I fished Pebble Creek a number of times. Both below, there's a campground, a national park campground on Pebble Creek. It is a pretty sterile stream, and so it's got fairly small fish. You kind of drive by and it's got these beautiful looking holes, but it just doesn't have much insect population, so it doesn't get really much size. I've also hiked up to the headwaters of Pebble Creek. It's really a pretty special place to go, not for the fishing. I brought a one weight up there, but that is one of the massive kind of spawning areas for the cutthroats. And so you can go up there in the summer and just see schools of hundreds and hundreds of little 4-inch trout up in the upper stretches of Pebble Creek. It's really beautiful, but not a particularly productive stream.
Okay.
Which is deceiving because I see a lot of people fishing because it looks beautiful. It just is not a very good stream.
Okay, and the last question we have right now is from Kent Mellon, who's wondering if you have fished the Arrow Lakes near Cook City. Are they worth the effort to get to them?
I have. And so Upper and Lower Arrow are kind of west of the Clark's Fork trailhead, usually accessed with a different trailhead. They're big. In fact, the picture I showed, you can pick them out. I mean, they're big lakes. They're fine. I really probably focused more on golden trout lakes. Neither have goldens. And they're a bit kind of like off to one side. And so it's a beautiful destination, but not necessarily the top of my list. I tend to like a little bit smaller lake too. The bigger size doesn't really help you. Although, Mike Rood was talking to me about bringing a pack raft, that might make a lot of sense on Arrow, but when you're fishing from shore, most of that lake is not helpful. Like, I actually don't want there to be a bunch of lake I can't fish.
Small lakes can be quite deep.
Yeah. I showed the map of Albino, which is that's a neat little lake you can hike to from Island Lake. And until I looked at that map, I had no idea it was over 100 feet deep. I mean, in retrospect, it kind of makes sense, but yeah, it's not a very big lake and it's super deep. All right, so for the folks in the room who had fished this area, any comments you guys would add? Any tricks I missed that you're willing to share?
I fished the Gardner River.
Oh.
It's really productive.
Yeah, I didn't get to that kind of western, kind of closer to the north entrance. There's some great streams over there as well. Yeah, the Gibbon, the Gardner.
Mike, I think you did a really good job.
Yeah.
Covered a lot of good places. I've pretty much been to most of those. And the only thing I would say is you downplayed the upper Lamar a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I've had really good luck.
So you're talking about fishing the upper Lamar for bigger size.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Not
Great.
20 inches.
Yeah. All right, good. Yeah.
I fished that up to Cache Creek and up to that too.
Yeah, so chapter members talking about, maybe don't listen to my kind of poo-pooing of the Lamar above the confluence with Soda Butte. It's really accessible. Like, you can park right there. It's a beautiful little walk. And there's some backcountry sites up there too, but they're typically they're very heavily used by pack trains. So that's a pretty popular pack train area around Cache Creek. But yeah, have you fished Cache Creek as well?
Fished up to No, I've not fished. up
the creek
Kent's
itself.
Creek.
Yeah, yeah.
I've gone just the bottom part of it,
Yeah.
where entrance of Lamar there. The one thing interesting on, if you walk from that Cache Creek, back to the Lamar.
Yeah, the
Valley,
Soda Butte, yeah,
Or-
where
yeah,
the Soda
back to
Butte dumps
Soda
in, yeah,
across a couple places where they got the hot springs.
Yes.
Right up
yeah,
in the river,
yeah.
no fish there.
No, no, no. Yeah, a little toasty for them.
Exciting, but also very sterile for a while when the water just got hot.
Right, especially, and I will say, these streams, depending on the year, can be placed under hoot owl restrictions, which has been a little more common the last few years. So these are restrictions on fishing in the afternoon due to elevated water temperature. And I think that can really impact that section of the Lamar too.
Yeah, I disagree or agree with you 100% that, it's a lot more accessible.
Yep.
Than people think, and especially if you're willing to walk a little bit.
Yep, yep. Great, yes,
You mentioned like the second meadow
Yeah.
of Slough
Yep.
is getting really popular.
yes,
I fished that many, many times
Yeah.
in years past, but not in the last number of years. So
it's changed. Yes. I mean, the question was about the popularity of the second meadow. It's definitely changed. I think back to maybe 15 years ago, like there would be very few people up there. And now it's not as busy as the campground, but it's busy. Like you'll see multiple groups and yeah, it's busy. It's, it's a good thing. I mean, honestly, I think, as long as we can all, it's a big river, there's miles and miles of water. We should not be on top of each other. I've reminded a few people of that who just aren't used to being on a big Western river. They come over and like, I could literally cast and hook their rod. I'm like, there is 6 miles of river. But if you love this hole, it is all yours. Like I'm gonna head on down, but it's definitely changed. I'd say the last 5 years or so. Yeah.
Yeah, years ago, we rarely see it, and we camped
Yep.
in the second meadow there, and would rarely see other fishermen.
Yeah. My impression is as the Soda Butte exploded in popularity, that pushed more anglers over to the Slough Creek Valley. And so some of the folks who normally wouldn't have gone to the trouble of hiking up to the first or second meadow and would have fished below the campground now, there's too many people below the campground, so they're going to the first meadow, and the people who are going to the first are now going to the second. And like I said, the people in the third, those guys are dropping down from Silvertip. And so, yeah, I feel like the anglers in the second meadow are folks who are really taking it seriously. They're willing to walk. The day hikers, they're willing to walk 2.5 hours each way. They're pretty serious anglers.
I mentioned that hill, we've been stuck by buffalo or bison on that hill.
Oh yeah,
They walk way to the hell all around, and they wouldn't move.
yeah, and yeah. I will say the question about wildlife, I would say number one thing to worry about is actually bison. If you look at the statistics for the park, where are the negative encounters between people and animals, it is bison, 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 bison. So do not underestimate them. They have numbers and size. They don't have sharp teeth, but both the males and the females have pointy horns. Yeah. And by the way, it's like the best problem you could ever have on a day fishing. Like, oh, I want to fish that run, but I can't because there's a beautiful herd of bison in it. Like, it's pretty much a great problem to have.
One thing I was gonna add for the alpine section, you got 10,000 feet, that weather in August can change.
Yeah.
And you're
Minutes,
looking
yeah.
at snow, and so be prepared if you haven't been hiking at altitude like that.
Yeah, and be prepared for the altitude. I will say my little routine is, I'll go out and fish the park for a day. Even if I'm not really there to fish the park, and I'm doing that just because we're living at 700 feet of elevation here in the Twin Cities. And rocketing up to 10,000 feet can be a recipe for kind of problems. And so, give yourself a little time to kind of get used to the elevation. Let your body make some red blood cells before you head up the hill. Great.
Hey, Mike, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. And so we'll call this tonight. Thank you for everybody for coming in person, the folks who dialed in today. So for the ones in the room, remember there's feathers in the back. I think there's some cups. We can grab some cups, right? And then there's some a flyer as well that explain what was covered earlier in the presentation. So thank you so much for coming and happy holidays.